Thank you. Yeah, so I get the pleasure of rounding off the day and get to run you through our development roadmap. So hopefully there's a couple of exciting items here. So what we're going to start with today is actually not go straight into the roadmap. We're actually going to spend a bit of time talking about a new procedure that we've implemented internally. And we just want to get you up to speed with this really, so you kind of know what's going on and within those Redmine tickets, what we're actually up to in the background. And the whole purpose of revising this process was really to ensure that we're developing the right thing first time and that we're maximizing efficiency for our development resource. Then we're going to get stuck into that work stack. And beware, some polls will be coming your way during this session. And we'll have some question and answer sessions as well. So it's been a key feature today that it's just about getting you lot involved and engaged. So we want to hear your thoughts. So let's start with this feature review process. So really this is all about the journey from feature ticket raised with us to the development work stack. And we've got a couple of key milestones along the way that we now go through. So the first part of the process, our customer operations team, so Alice, James, Pat, and Rob, they'll be getting in touch with you to triage that ticket. They might have a couple of questions for you. They might want a bit more information or further clarification about the request. At that point, it could be that it was a bug all along, or it could be that it's just support. So we'll kind of separate that out into a separate work stream, and either that will be resolved by customer operations, or it'll go off as a bug and the development team will prioritize that. So that will be fixed straight away. The new part of the process and what is happening internally is that it will go to a stage 2 review meeting with customer operations, myself and Sally. And what we're doing at that meeting is just assessing whether there would be sufficient support across the industry for these features, how important it is to implement something like that, and whether it could be that there's just like a gap in knowledge about the system, something that we can exploit and kind of expand upon. Again, there are some outcomes from this. So it could be that, again, it's reported as a bug. We might reject it at that point, and that's just if we don't have enough information, if it's a very niche request, if it's very difficult to implement. There's a couple of reasons why we might reject it at that point, but we'll never reject it without giving you some feedback as to why we've come to that decision and also what alternatives we'll put in place. We'll also pool it together with some related tickets. So it could be that it's like a module rewrite. So there's a bigger feature there from that change. If it's successful at that point, it'll go through to a stage 3 meeting, and that's with our web developer, Jace. And that's just to ascertain whether it's technically feasible, whether we can implement this. Again, if it's really difficult to do, it might be rejected at this point. Or it will go on to stage 4, and that's to agree the technical scope. And this will be with myself, Jace, and Jules as well. And at this point, it depends on the nature of the feature. If we agree it could be that it becomes a project, if it's a big change, or it might just go straight onto that work stack. So that's the whole thing that's going on under the covers. And that's really just to ensure that all of the key stakeholders at AssessTech are fully involved. We are all aware of the changes that we're making to the system, that we've really vetted all of the outcomes, and that we're keeping in mind service users. We want to implement some new processes as well, in addition to all of these other processes. So the first of these requires a little bit of customer participation, and this is a request for comment. And the second item is a focus group as well. So we'll be kind of talking through these in more detail. So a request for comment, what is it? So this is going to be a document where we describe the scope of a feature. We'll be describing that in detail. It will include our proposed solution, what changes will be made, and we'll be asking some questions to you at that point. how does this influence your system? Does this work with how you operate your system as well? And it's a good opportunity to engage with us. We'll send it out via email. There'll be a time to live on each request for comment. And if you'd prefer to discuss it with your customer operations specialist via some meetings, that's absolutely fine as well. It doesn't have to come back via email or in a document. And the other outcome is that it will go to a focus group. So this will be reserved for more complex requirements. And I get the sense that there will be a lot of focus groups coming out of today's session about what we've sort of run through. It could be also that from an RFC, there's not broad agreement. So we just need to make sure that we're tailoring the solution, we're getting it right. And as I said at the top of the session, that we're developing the right thing first time. So I have a little live poll for you. Would you be happy to take part in a focus group? And it's absolutely fine if you would prefer not to, but it'd be good to gauge who's interested, who would want to participate. No questions?
We can also take questions at this stage about that process if anybody's got any. There's nothing on the app so far. Okay, well, we have pretty much a resounding yes. We have 85% yeah. Oh, it's just gone down. 80% yes, 20% maybe, and absolutely 0 no's.
Amazing, brilliant. Cool. So I will be in touch.
We have your name.
Cool. So we've got no questions at this point.
No
questions from the floor
room about the process so far. No.
Okay. So the good stuff, the roadmap. So we're going to run through a couple of items today. First of these will be single sign-on. We're going to be looking at the messaging solution in more detail, so outside of the bulletin module. We've got some thoughts on some My Teams and candidate dashboard visualizations. We would like to make some revisions to the assessment module and to the check and forms modules as well. So let's start with single sign-on. So this has come up at previous user forums, and this is an item that is still set on the work stack for 5.2.4. So that's the planned release. That's not going anywhere. That's going to come in 5.2.4, and it's just going to be totally about single sign-on. The principle of single sign-on is that it will ensure end users have quick and easy access to ACMS from wherever they're accessing our services, and this will cascade down into the apps as well, ASS, a bulletin, and a check. So we're going to deliver this as a 2-stage project. The first stage is just going to be a simple SSO implementation, and this will be sufficient to ensure end users can authenticate with a single ID and password as designated by your company platform. It will be a fairly superficial change, which won't require very much involvement from the customer, but it will be dictated by your company IT policy. Stage 2 and possibly 3 will be a little bit more involved, and the integration will be a little bit more intricate. And that's definitely the point at which we'll want to engage with your IT teams. So that's why we haven't put so much detail in here, is that is where that sort of focus and discussion will mainly take place. It could be that we also just open this up to an RFC, so we'll get your feedback that way. So messaging. As Alice mentioned earlier in the day, we'll be implementing a new bulletin messaging service that will allow end users to interact with notices and important documents via Telegram initially, and potentially Signal as well. However, in time, we'd like to open this up so we can get more functionality out of this change. And the first way that we would like to kind of implement this is through notifications. So making these more bespoke based on functions and duties, and we can send those out straight to Telegram rather than via email. In addition, we could do some reporting functions from this as well. And what we would like to do is have a way for an end user to interact with the system to obtain data without having to log into ACMS, pull a report, kind of filter it from there. The idea is that they could talk to the bot to ask it a question. So how many overdue assessments are there on my team? And it would respond back and tell you exactly how many you have. In addition, there'd be some functions that you could perform. So if an assessor completes an assessment, a candidate would get a notification to say that it's ready for them to have a look at, and they could sign it off from there. So they could fully seal it themselves. But those functions are subject to a focus group. So we'd love to hear your thoughts on what would be useful for that messaging solution. Next item we've got is better visualizations. We've got our lovely quote again. So all the data is there, but there's a lot of clicking about. So the idea is that this will kind of help with that issue. And this will involve revisions to My Teams and also on the candidate dashboard and potentially My Page as well. So what do we want to see from My Teams? We want a better tool for managing teams. At the moment, a team leader would have to go into the candidate dashboard for every single member of their team to see the information that's most important. You know, like if they've got an expired medical, that's either on a report or they've got to go into the candidate dashboard and then to the medical tab to find that out. But what if from the My Teams widget, we could just have a graphical display of all of that information? So things like expiry statuses for medicals, expiry statuses for assessments, the same for competence dates, how many unread bulletins are on them, how many unfetched checks. It's just going to be a total recap for your team. This will be accessible to team leaders and we'll be able to define what appears on those dashboards as well. So admins will be able to configure it to display certain bits of information, whatever's important to team leaders. And as I mentioned, we really want to go down the route of making it more of like a graphical display. So I know there was a lot of interest in the Power BI work that Pip was doing. So something more along those lines, something that's a bit more engaging. As I said, admins will get to decide what appears on that. I'm afraid we've got another live poll. Which widgets do you think would be useful on the My Teams page?
While you do that, I've got a couple of questions here. Alex Walker, I assume that SSO will only be implemented if we, brackets our company admin, requests it. We're a small company, it could cause more problems than it solves. Yes, Alex, we're no intention of making life harder. You don't have to have single sign-on if you don't want it.
I think the infrastructure will be there for all.
The
whether you
infrastructure will
take
be there,
advantage
yeah,
of it.
Absolutely.
I think Jules is a...
Jules, you want to say something?
So in answer to that question, in the next release, there will be single sign-on for every single instance of ACMS. If you don't want to do integration back into your customer security systems, there is no work for you. So just to clarify that answer, all of the new systems moving forward will have a single sign-on system built into them.
Perfect. There's a question about forms. We'll hold on that one. Will Tisdale, when are you going back to using more logical version number, i.e., well, we're not, Will. Is Justin Willett, is the plan for better visual actions of reports? I think he means better visualizations of reports, such as regular graphs and tables with regular date ranges, etc., every 4 weeks. This will be useful for trend analysis.
So I think this would be for a very specific purpose, and ultimately the interactive dashboards would be more suitable for having reporting display, and that's something that we're reassessing. So that will come in time, but not as part of this same bit of work.
I also think you've got a Power BI license internally, and then the better answer might be for us to send you to do the thing that Pip's doing, so that you can make your own widgets on Power BI.
Be useful if you could integrate ingest some of that data but specify. So
Yeah.
if you
Yeah, and that is a thing you could do today. We just need to specify what you want in those reports that go over there. Stuart Player, can we have in the teams area what team they are in according to their role, i.e. a driver manager also has, i.e. a driver manager also competent as a guard has 2 team leaders but doesn't distinguish which assessments are owned by who?
Yes, if you have multiple teams, you'll be able to have a drop down where you select which team you're looking at. So that's if you're associated with multiples. And that premise would work for admins as well. You'd be able to select from a bunch of teams on the system.
I don't think that's what Stuart means. Can we give Stuart the mic, please?
When trying to sort out overdue assessments, who is your team owner? So if you've got a number of roles, who looks after your guards assessments, who looks after your driver assessments? Because it just comes up, you've got an overdue assessment as a guard, but it lists the driver manager as the responsible because it's the first in the list. So it wants to be able to say, right, this person looks after that role, this person looks after that role.
It sounds like you want more than one team type. We'll
Yeah,
have to have a look at that. But
I think the plan is to define them on a role and team type basis as well.
Okay.
But yeah, that's something we definitely
So
need
that's not
to
specifically
include.
something to do with this Teams dashboard, but yeah, understood.
There's like an underline, yeah.
Yeah, good on that one. Okay, my poll's gone dead again. Michael, sorry. It's disappeared. Did I jibber jabber for too long? Is that what happened? Is that all I have to do? I could probably do that myself. You just turned it off and turned it on again, guys. There's a fairly broad interest in all of these widgets. In fact, the most popular ones are medical expiry, schedule expiry, and CMS events. So we'll take that away with us.
We will take that away, yeah.
Perfect.
Any other questions?
None.
No?
That's for later.
Cool. Okay, and this is just a brief walkthrough. It's basically the same premise, but on the candidate dashboard. So ideally what we'd like to have is an overview tab that comes before the personnel tab on the candidate dashboard that summarizes graphically all of the key bits of information that appear on that candidate dashboard. So a manager could go straight there and not have to click through each of the tabs. And the widget examples are exactly the same. So medical expiry, assessment expiries, and even post-incident decisions. So you could get a count of what they've got against them. And again, admins can decide what widgets go there. So they can assign those tabs. And we've got the same question for you, but this time in relation to the candidate dashboard. So would those same widgets, or which of those widgets would be most useful on the candidate dashboard?
Please note on this, you don't have to pick one. You can tick all the ones that you like the look of.
Yeah.
Which might be why we had low uptake on some of the others. Yeah. Yeah, the results here are a little bit different. People are very interested in RAG status for competent states, post-incident decision and incapacities, which I guess you'd expect to be interesting on a person. Medical expiry and schedule expiry, CMS events are still high. Perfect.
Lovely. Any other questions at this point? Lovely. Okay, so let's have a little look at the assessment module. And we've got 2 key items that we want to address here. The first of these is the ability to link assessments to configurable resources. And the second is a revision to the way that we create schedules. So we'll carry on with our existing model, but we want to add another model on top, and that's based on periodicity. So let's start with our configurable resources. So our quotes back again. The idea is that at the moment you're having to do a lot of clicking about. So if you sign off a criteria unit within an assessment, that in addition signs off a resource. So it could be something like lifts and escalators or fire safety or something like that, you would then have to go in and add that resource to someone and track it there in addition. But what if these two things were linked? And the areas that we thought this would be most useful for is in relation to if you're assessed on a traction or a route, this could then add that to the traction and route sections. If you sign off an engineering task, that would then add that resource. Or if you attain TOLO or SIO competence, it could expand into like assessor and instructor status as well. That might be a common use. The idea is that we would just create a mechanism to link those two things based on the criteria unit. So we could define the rules such that once you get X amount of greens on the criteria unit or you're found competent on that assessment overall, that then adds the resource to you and signs that off. And the second item is all about schedules and periodicity. So this was a couple of slides we had great fun making. We've got our schedules back again. So the idea is that we've got lots of schedule periods that are defined and we map our criteria to this. But what we found from talking to Pip at Eurostar is that this just doesn't really fit the engineering model. This isn't how those schedules work. So we need to find a way that will make it work for engineering. And what we've come up with is something called periodicity. And the idea is that you can have 3 competencies in this example that are signed off on different bases. So competence 1, you're signed off every 6 months. Competence 2 is yearly, and competence 3 is every 2 years. The same idea applies that you can map criteria units to that. But then what the plan is that we'll create a dynamic schedule. So instead of having schedule periods that go horizontally, we've now got schedule periods that go vertically. So C1 in this case is happening every 6 months across the 2 years, C2 every year, and C3 every 2 years. And the good thing about this is that if you perform C2 early, for example, this would set back C2, so you're still fulfilling it every year. Ultimately, what we're doing is creating a way to set recurring assessments. That's really the basis of the idea. And we think that this is most beneficial to engineering, but there are probably some circumstances in which this would work for operational colleagues as well. So with that in mind, do you think that you would use periodicity in your business?
While they do that live poll, we've got a couple of questions from the earlier thing about displays on candidate dashboards.
Yep.
This one's from Peter Edwards. And it's about, can you form, he's basically asking for a separate summary page, a different summary page for control than for a manager. So can you formulate a summary page for use by control room staff, so essential information required by controllers, e.g. post-incident decision, is all in one place? And there's a bit of detail there.
Yeah, I think we could define it on a role basis as well.
And on a security group basis, presumably, because the widgets you
Controllers
get...
would need to see different things.
Yeah.
Yes,
Peter. Peter's online, I assume. Yes, Peter, we will take that into account. Another comment here, not a question, but if developed, can we discuss? In terms of configurable resources, we need to be able to select which resources rather than have something automatically selected when assessment is completed, as it might be different for different people, i.e. plant and equipment, despite having the same assessment period completed. Yeah, Annabelle, it's not about the period, it's about the criteria that you've assessed, so that does make it a bit easier to map.
But we'll be very clear about the rules that we set up to make that automate as well. So we'll be sure that it doesn't do it accidentally.
From Tim Forshaw, more of a comment, but the periodicity functionality may lend itself to verification activities. Yes. What a good thought.
Amazing.
Get in.
2 birds.
We agree.
Yeah.
So do you think you would use periodicity? 48% yes, 32% maybe, 20% no.
That might change now we know it can be used for verification.
Anybody want to revote now? Cool, thank you.
Cool. Any other questions at this point? Nope. Cool. So check module. So we released this in 2019, and the primary aim of it was to digitize the process of fulfilling fitness for duty checks. And that seems to work pretty well. And then in 2020, what we did was we expanded that so that it would cover custom checks as well. So you could create your own checks for whatever checks you create in your business. However, that model is not necessarily working as well as it could do. And this is something that Pip alluded to earlier on. So what we want to do is rectify all of these issues in one go with one bit of work. And the first change that we really want to make to the check module is to provide the ability to schedule checks. So at the moment, it's a little bit limited in that regard. They essentially work as one-off events. But what we want to do is to be able to set an expiry time or to define how often the check occurs. And then it will act as a repeatable event on a rolling schedule. So we could capture daily, weekly, monthly checks that essentially become live on an automated basis. At the moment, you have to do checks all at once, or they're ultimately linked with the fitness for duty check. And we want to separate that out. So initially we thought that the model, or how it would be used, was that you would do all of your checks at once. But it seems that isn't the case, and there might be times where you just want to carry out an independent check. It'll still be possible to do them all at once, but it'll also be separated out so they can be done individually. We want to be able to add the ability to add a check to someone from the candidate dashboard. So at the moment, by using the check workbench, it becomes an admin-only task. And we found that managers tend to be the ones that are putting in checks. So it'd be good if they could do that from the candidate dashboard instead. And lastly, we found that the options are a little bit limited for fitness for duty checks. So we've got fit and unfit, but there might be a reason why you were fit, or there might be, you might need to qualify why someone was fit. Maybe they were fit with restrictions. The same might be the case for unfit. They might have been sick, which is a different reason altogether. So we want to add a qualifying comment to the option so that you can define that. And that's what we have planned for check. The last item is forms. So the first item we have on this list is the A-Forms app, the long-awaited A-Forms app, which is actually in development at the moment. We've seen it, it's being tested. It'll be a little while before it's ready, but it's sort of going back and forth internally at the moment. And what the A-Forms app will do is replicate what you can do from the form workbench. So a user could log in to the app, download all the form types that are applicable to them. They can add a record, edit it, delete if it's in draft, and lock it, and then sync it back up to the web. So essentially they can do forms on the go wherever they are. And then finally, we've got forms that make other records in ACMS. So at the moment, the forms module is very much a standalone piece of work. But what if you could create or put answers into a form that could then trigger an incident to be raised in the incident module? The idea being you could have like an accident form that would then create an incident in the incident form, incident module. Same could be done for implementing checks. You would put in your answers to a form and that would implement a check. Same for requesting a route refresh, logging trainee driver hours, or requesting authorization for an overdue assessment. So these are just some ideas that we've come up with initially. I think raising an incident is probably going to be fairly popular. But what we would like to do is open this up to an RFC at some point to get an idea of what would be useful, what you could use this for in ACMS.
This is sort of make your own wizard, right?
Yeah. And that's actually it. Do we have any questions about any of that?
We have a good one from Stuart. Are there any plans to develop an A-Forms app? I guess we've answered that. Cool. There's no more questions. All right. I was just going to say, there's no more questions. Does anyone on the floor have a hand up question they'd like to ask? There you go. Send Stuart the mic, please.
As part of forms, can we have multiple people checked at the same time? Whoa, that rumbles some people's boat there, look. Because otherwise you're doing, right, I've done this, done that, enter. Right, find the next person, done that, enter. So if you say, well, actually, it's the same thing. It's a safety brief. I've sat down, we've talked about this. These are the people that attended today, because we engaged or something like that. Submit, and they all have a separate record.
So it'd have to be a separate record, not one record that goes against each person.
Yes, one entry that then goes against each person.
So you want a form with repeating sections or maybe a wizard
It's just one form, but the ability to add it to multiple people at once.
at once? Oh.
You like that one, don't you?
We probably need to take that under
Yeah,
advisement.
I'll have a think, yeah.
Have a think about that one.
I won't commit at this time.
A general question, are all slides available to download? Yes, they will be. I'll send some instructions out. I don't know how yet. I assume it's a function of the app, is it? There you go. Michael at the back's nodding. I'll send you all a email about that. Question from Justin Willett. Can the forms checks be sent outside of ACMS to both people and systems? What have you got in mind there, Justin? Can someone send him the mic?
So some of the information capture will be useful for the other systems. So rostering systems, Moses systems, control systems. Yeah, route refresher comes to mind, Sally. So could it go outside, or could it be an API that goes into something else?
I think Jules
I
wants
think
to take
Jules
this one.
might take that. Someone, where's the other mic?
Come on, Pat.
That was probably the slowest you could possibly have got across the room. At least you were safe. So in answer to your question, what we're planning at the moment is a much more open event system within ACMS.
Sorry, Jules, you need to hold the mic closer, please.
Is
Thank you.
that better?
That's much better, sir. Thank you.
We're planning a much broader set of functions for the event architecture within ACMS. Now, that may end up being something along the lines of when one of those forms gets filled in, we generate this piece of XML, which we post to a remote site. Or the converse may be the case, which is we get a piece of information from a third-party system that then results in a notification being generated and a requirement for a form to be filled in. So that's what we're planning with the next version, is to have that bolted into the system. Now, the reason why we can do that is because of the infrastructure that we've built in specifically for the Telegram bot. All of the information moves back and forwards between those two systems so that they can send the messages and receive the responses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's really good to know. I suppose the only follow-up question is when?
So that is in fact in 523 CC, which is going to be going out the door fairly soon. 524 is when these things will be more exposed and we'll be taking more requirements from the customers. But what we actually want from you is to get involved in the RFC. So if we start having in the focus groups, a result of it produces an RFC, which is when we produce certain forms, we would like to send emails, we would like to send texts, we would like to send something else. Then we can start evaluating that, make sure everybody else is on board and start implementing it. So I would say to you, yes, it's something we will be exposing, but what I'm asking from you is to get some feedback so that we do it right first time. Does that make sense?
Happy, Justin?
Yeah, very happy it's come in. I still like a date, but there we go.
We use the forms quite a lot. Is it possible to take away when you create a form to default automatically to the person who's creating it? Because I had a number against my name because I forget to change the candidate's name in it, and that's go back for them through and work out who it was for. And
Yeah. I think we might have a ticket for that already, which is on the work stack.
We'll put that on the A-Forms work stack, definitely. In fact, I've seen that ticket. It came through our feature meeting.
Yeah.
So yes. There's a very similar question online from Alex Walker. There are many standard industry forms. I don't know what this is, e.g. RT3185. There we go, we all know what that is. That I'm sure many companies would welcome for train crew to use on the Forms app. Linking to Justin's request then for the recipient, e.g. document controller, as well as line manager. So yes, I'm guessing we can workflow a form somewhere. Yeah, yes, Alex, I think the answer to that is the same as the answer Jules gave to Justin, which is when we get the new messaging infrastructure,
Yes.
jobs are good. 'Un.
Yep.
Do we have any more questions about forms or check or anything that Hannah's spoken about? No? Any questions in general about today or anything anyone would like to say? Perfect. Cool.